Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Welcome to the Data Insight Summit. How are you guys enjoying the conference so far? All good? You guys went to the keynote this morning? Nice. I would have loved to, but I fell asleep at home, so I just came in late. I just arrived here like 15 minutes ago. But yeah, welcome. We're really happy to have you in town this week. I think it's going to be a great week for you guys to not just show up at the sessions, but also engage with the product team. We have, as the experts, we have a few other activities that you should definitely stop by and hang around with the team. With that, let's go into the session. We have about 47 minutes left, so I guess I'll start going. If there's more people coming in, I'm cool with that as well. The more, the merrier. But let's get started. We're going to talk about shaping and transforming data using Excel 2016. And so before talking about shape and transform specifically, I wanted to actually set a little bit of context. And you're probably going to hear a lot this week about these two different products, these two different tools, Excel and Power BI Desktop. How many of you use Excel? OK, yeah, that was my guess. She doesn't use it, but OK, or probably is not paying attention. OK, so Excel, it's that tool that it's been around for longer than I've been around. Let's put it that way. And it's actually a great, perfect tool to actually go and do some ad hoc analysis, pull some data either from an external data source or just type some data in, like basically capture your view of the wall in a spreadsheet and then perform data analysis and data crunching and data blending in the spreadsheet itself. And with that, it comes with a lot of power, with a lot of additional features that we've built around. You could talk about things like Power Pivot. You could talk about things like the data model itself, Power Map, all of the Excel visualizations that you have built in. And a lot of other capabilities. Pivot tables would be another great example. And now things like Power Query and the new Get and Transform. So lots of rich tools surrounding the Excel spreadsheet so that you can either get data in or analyze and blend and crunch the data in the spreadsheet or visualize the data. And it's all great. It's all goodness. Now, this new tool came around, Power BI Desktop. And you might think, OK, well, so what's the relationship between one and the other? When should I use one and not the other? So for everything that I just mentioned, so you should use Excel. It's the perfect tool for the job. Now, what's Power BI Desktop about? Power BI Desktop, it's a tool that's fully optimized and designed around being able to create interactive visualizations and interactive reports. So basically, it optimizes that flow of getting data in, doing some data preparation, doing some data modeling, and then finally throwing a few visualizations, a few report pages together, and then be able to publish that back into Power BI, into powerbi.com. So that's the main difference between both tools. Excel is a much more general tool for data analytics, and Power BI Desktop is fully, specifically optimized for that end-to-end of creating an interactive report. With that in mind, you should keep in mind basically the common part of what I just said. I mentioned data analysis, and then I mentioned creating a data report. What's the common word on both? Data, right? So you need a way of getting data in both the scenarios. And the good news is that the same get data and data preparation capabilities that we give you in Excel, they're exactly the same that you get in Power BI Desktop, so that what you learn in one tool, you can apply in the other. No matter where you start from, it just works both ways. So that's great news. So today we're going to be focusing on specifically the Excel environment. Think about it as the Excel host for doing that data acquisition and data preparation. Tomorrow I have another session that's about data preparation as well, but it's focused on Power BI Desktop. So if you're interested in data prep, you might want to show up to both sessions. If you don't stand me, you might as well just leave right now if you want. So let's talk a little bit about data acquisition. What are the main challenges? Challenge number one, it's hard to find the right data to connect to. So maybe you need to build a report or you need to analyze some sales data. You just don't know what it is. You might have heard about this thing called a database. But you, the data analyst, you just don't know where that data lives. You need to go ask someone on your IT department or maybe your partner like NextDesk who knows how to connect to that SQL Server database. So it's kind of a rocket scientist. Like he knows how to connect to the database, man. So that's the first challenge, how to find, and then once you actually figure out what's the server or what's the file path that you need to connect to for that data set. How you actually connect, that's also very challenging. And we have many different experiences for connecting to data. We're going to do kind of a little bit of a walk of shame through all of our get data experiences that we've developed over time. And the conclusion at the end is that we have so many different ways of getting data, and each of them has their own pros and cons. So it's really confusing. The third point here is that, guess what? Most of the times when you connect to a specific data set, the data is not in the shape that you need for your analysis. In fact, some of the studies that have been done, like research studies out there by consulting firms like Gartner and those guys, they'll tell you that the average data analyst spends about 70 or 75% of their time, of the overall time of analyzing data, just on data acquisition and data preparation. So it takes a long time to actually get something into the shape you need so that you can start getting some insights from that data. Even to make things worse, this data shaping and data preparation is usually a one-off and is not repeatable. You always, like, if I create that analysis this month and then next month I get the next batch of data for my data set, I need to go and tweak a few things or maybe even redo it from scratch depending on the tool that you're using so that you can reuse that analysis. So that's really bad. The last two, things get even worse when you not only have to connect to that data set, let's say that SQL Server database, but you also need to connect to an Excel file or a CSV file or many different CSV files for that matter. So how you actually bring all of that data together and combine it in a way that you can actually correlate that data and make sense out of it and see the synergies between data coming from different systems, maybe coming from a sales database versus a products spreadsheet or something like that. It's really hard to combine all of those data sets because going back to the previous points, for some of these data sets, you might have to be using specific data access technologies or data access products, and then combining data from two different data access technologies is just like hell, And the last point here, maybe you've heard about these 3 Vs. This is actually, it's a good read if you get the time. If you search for the 3 Vs of big data, you'll find something that talks about the volume, the velocity, and the variety. So the 3 main challenges with big data is not only about the volume of the data, like having large data sets, millions and millions of rows in each table, but it's also about the velocity of change of that data. You might be connecting to that sales database that maybe changes every minute, and you need to combine that data with data coming from a spreadsheet that maybe has products data that maybe just changes once every 6 months, every time that we change our product line. So how you actually make sure that your analysis is correlating those 2 data sets in a way that it's consistent, so you don't end up with sales data for some products that they still don't show up in the other data set and so on. And the last point here is the variety. So it's not only about how big or how diverse this data is, but also the variety of the shapes and the types of data sources that people need to connect to in order to do something meaningful with that data. So with all of those challenges, let's take a look at what are the different tools that you have in the Microsoft ecosystem to date, or actually previous tools before what we're going to show you right after. And let's take a look at this first one. You recognize this? This is the Data tab in Excel 2013. So that's something that's been around for a few years now. It gives you access to a few different data sources like Access, web. You could do some web scraping. You can do some text import, a few other sources like SQL Server and a few others. Let's take a look at some of these experiences. From Access, you get to specify an Access database to connect to, and then you get to see each of these items here is a table, and it actually gives you a bit of metadata, like when it was last modified, when it was created. But it's not a very rich experience. You cannot see the actual content of the table. So if I had customers and customers 1, which one I pick? I don't know. I don't see the data. I don't know which one is right. So you can also not reshape and clean this data before you bring it in. So it's actually relatively poor experience for what you need to do today as a data analyst. Let's look at another example. This is a bit more fancy. This allows you to bring data from the web, and it basically allows you to preview the data in the context. For instance, in this case, I provide a web URL to this web page, and I get to see the table before I actually select it, and then I'm able to import it. How many of you have actually played with this connector? And how many of you were able to make it work? Okay, a few. Okay, so yeah, it's a great idea, but it also has some room for improvement, and especially with new web technologies like JavaScript, jQuery-based, HTML5, and so on. There's things that they're just not supported with these connectors, so we need to make those experiences better and more powerful. From text, another example, you can go in. Here you actually get a preview of the data, and you can specify some initial data preparation tasks, I guess, or criteria, like for instance, picking how the delimiter works for between columns, like if it's fixed width or based on specific delimiters. You can also specify if your data has headers. You can then pick the delimiter if you actually said that it was delimited by a delimiter character. You can preview what the data would look like per column after picking that delimiter. You could also go and assign specific data types for each column. You could even do more advanced operations like specifying what's the decimal separator digit, like comma versus dot and so on. Same for the 1000 separator character. Another example from SQL Server here, this is an experience that we improved in Excel 2013 compared to previous versions of the data tab. And here we actually allow you to preview the list of tables, but also specify whether you want to select multiple tables or a single table. And you can then also even save this as a connection file, an ODC file, so you can reconnect to this later easily. But these are all experiences that need some improvement. For once, they don't allow you, in most cases, to preview the data. They don't allow you to do data preparation before you actually load the data into the spreadsheet. And they don't allow you to actually combine data and subset data based on different data set constraints coming from different data sources. So that's something that we wanted to improve. And then, because one data tab was not enough, we came up with another data tab. Which one of you recognizes this data tab? Yep, this is the Power Pivot Get External Data. So if you're a rocket scientist that uses Power Pivot and does data modeling on top of your regular Excel spreadsheet work, this is actually a different Get Data experience that we've enabled for you. And here you're going to see a bit more of higher-end features. Here's an example. You have SQL Server database connector. So here you can actually do things like provide a connection string. You could test the connection itself. You could actually select multiple tables by default. So if you notice in Excel data tab, the default behavior was single table import. Here we actually assume that you want to do multi-table import. So we optimize for that with the checkboxes directly out of the box. You can even preview and filter some of these data. But all you can do in terms of filtering is just selecting columns. You cannot do value-based filters, or you cannot exclude rows and stuff like that. It's just, I want that column, I don't want that column. So it's an improvement on top of what you had with the data tab, but it's still ways to go in terms of capabilities for data preparation. With Power Pivot, we actually also brought more data sources. Thinking about the use cases for Power Pivot, you expect to see here a lot of the enterprise-ready data sources like third-party relational databases. You see things like Oracle, Teradata, Sybase, Informix, DB2, and so on. A few others, like you could connect to bring in data from reporting services reports. You could bring data from a Windows Azure Marketplace. You could even get recommendations for related data sets from Marketplace compared to what you have already loaded into your data model. So that's kind of a cool feature. But finally, and this is probably the experience that, not the experience, but the actual user model that looks the closest to what I'm going to show you today with Get and Transform and Power Query, which is MS Query, Microsoft Query. So this is actually the closest in terms of a user model. It's basically an experience that lets you connect to a data source, get to preview some of the data in those tables, and then be able to apply some data transformations and build a query based on a UI experience. So in many ways, this is the closest experience you have before Power Query or before Get and Transform. Now let's talk a little bit about the new stuff. Let's talk about the new Get and Transform capabilities. How do we help you, fight against some of those challenges that we covered at the beginning with the data acquisition challenges? We give you connectivity to a wide range of data sources. Today we support about 40 different data sources in Excel. We're going to bring a bunch more really soon. We allow you to connect to data, and the query editing experience that we give you is based on a subset. It's based on a preview of your data. It's enough of the content, like a few hundred rows, that it will give you an idea about the shape and the structure of your table so that you can start performing data reshape activities, like maybe splitting columns, filtering out some values, removing some columns, doing pivots, and all of that. But it's not the entire data set. And this is actually a very important concept, because when you think about big data scenarios, you might be connecting to a database or a data table that has maybe 3 million rows on it, 3 million records. You actually really want to make sure that you are connecting to just a preview initially, so that you apply all of your transformations with a very easy to use interactive experience. And then once you're ready to go, you've defined your full query logic, then you're going to run that against the entire data set, and that's what's going to take longer. But at least that initial data preparation experience is going to be much more fluent for you and much more user-friendly. Let's put it that way. Now, the third bullet here, also very important. We have about 40 different data sources today. We give you a consistent experience on top of all of them. This means that every transformation that you can apply within the query editor, it will work the same way. Basically, you can apply it on top of a SQL Server database table or on top of a CSV table. Think about something like a group by operation or a split column by delimiter operation. We give you the same affordances in terms of the transformation capabilities for all of these data sources. In some cases where we are dealing with a backend, a data source that is smart enough to understand those transformations, Power Query or Get and Transform will actually take those steps and will actually translate into a native operation that runs in the source. For instance, if you were doing a group by operation on top of SQL Server, that Power Query transformation will actually translate into a group by statement in SQL and would actually run in the SQL Server database for you. That way it offloads some of those processing tasks into the underlying data source. Now, if you're working with something more dummy, like for instance a CSV file, there's no such thing as a group by operation performed in CSV, right? So for those cases, the Power Query engine will actually compensate and will perform those operations locally for you. And even more cool, when you're actually combining data across SQL and CSV, we will also try and do optimization so that we might end up sending some data from that CSV file as part of a SQL statement. So for instance, if you were filtering rows in a products table in SQL based on a product category table where the category names are defined in CSV, we will end up sending those CSV names, or sorry, those category names in the CSV file to the underlying database through T-SQL. So those are pretty powerful what we call query folding capabilities, which basically means try to offload as much as you can to the underlying data source. The last point here, I kind of touched on this already, is just we're not only giving you a great experience to connect to a single data source and make it consistent for all 40 data sources, but we also make it easy for you to combine data from multiple of these sources. And we support combining data in a few different ways. One is you have two tables. You want to add the columns from one table to the other. That's what we call a merge operation. For those of you familiar with database terms, it's a join operation. We also support the other operation, which is you have a table with a bunch of rows, you have another table with a bunch of rows, they have the same set of columns, and you would like to add those rows at the bottom of the other table. That's what we call append queries. If you're familiar with database terms, it's a union operation. And we also support other ways, like I touched base on this just a couple of minutes ago, with sending data from one source to the other, like sending a category name from a CSV file to a database to apply some filters. So that's also another way of combining and subsetting data or correlating data across different data sources. With that, let's look at the current state of affairs. Let's look at the world before Excel 2016. We had the Power Query add-in available for Excel 2010 and 2013. How many of you have used Power Query add-in? Okay, quite a few people. That's great to see. In the last 3 years that's been in market, we've done about 32 monthly updates. We've skipped a few months here and there. Mostly people like me would be on vacation and would never do like the blog posts or stuff like that. But for the majority, we've tried to release a set of capabilities and then put a lot of attention to customer feedback, frowns, forum threads. We're committed to reply to every incoming customer feedback around our product and take that into account and then add incremental value with every new monthly update to our product. We've released over 200 new or improved features over the last 3 years on those 32 monthly updates. And we'll continue doing that going forward. But things with Excel 2016 get even better. And this is why. Before actually going there, how many of you are already using Excel 2016? OK, great. So you'll be pleasantly surprised, I hope, that the Power Query capabilities are now inside Excel proper, meaning that you don't need to download a separate add-in. There's no more problems with additional setup steps. You need to run the Power Query add-in installation as an admin. You're not an admin. You need to contact IT to get it set up for you, and so on. Here is just much easier. You install Excel 2016. You go to the Data tab. You find Power Query. You find Get and Transform is how the new group in the Data tab it's called. A few other goodness or good things with it. The 32 monthly updates that you're going to get going forward, they're all integrated with the rest of Office click-to-run updates. And also with MSI updates going forward. So that's great because now you can centralize all of your Office updates through those 2 channels, and you don't need to handle different updates to the Power Query add-in. We'll continue with the incremental updates every month. And the best part, my favorite part actually, are the last 2 bullets here, is that by virtue of being in the box and not being an external add-in anymore, we get to party with the rest of great Excel features that exist. Like, for instance, integration with undo, redo, be able to copy-paste queries, integrating with the compatibility checker, the document inspector, and all of those features that Excel has, which, of course, the crown jewel is the last point here, which is the object model support. So now with Excel 2016, you can interact with your object model in Excel to be able to create new queries. Hey, Ken, good morning. Create new queries, modify existing queries, refresh, delete them. I know he's going to complain after the sessions. He's going to say, you need to add this, need to add that to the object model. But how cool is that? You'd be surprised of how many hundreds of requests we've gotten over the last 3 years for Excel OM integration. So it's finally here. Now let's start building those great VBA automation logic using Power Query queries, and then let's continue doing incremental updates from our side to those capabilities. With that, let's go into demos. I think it's been enough talking. Let's go into demos. And that's where I'm going to go after the summit, I hope. All right, so duplicate the screen. Let's go into Excel 2016. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is kind of to prove you that there's no longer a Power Query add-in. I'm going to go to my favorite dialog inside Excel, which is the Options dialog, the Add-ins tab. Notice the sarcasm on favorite, because usually when I come here it's because something failed to load, and then I'm just wondering why. There's no Microsoft Power Query add-in here anymore. That's because we actually integrated it natively. And if you go into the Data tab, you're going to see the new Get and Transform group has all of the Power Query connectors and capabilities, all of the file connectors, database, Azure, other sources, and all of that. You might be wondering, OK, why do you add this Get and Transform thing with something called From SQL Server, but then next to it I have Get External Data, the classic Get External Data group with From SQL Server as well. The longer-term roadmap for us is to actually fully replace the classic connectors with the Get External Data connectors with the Power Query capabilities. We still have some functional gaps that we're working through. By the time we're ready, you'll see us just hiding the Get External Data group that you have in there. There's, of course, a way that you'll be able to bring it back if you're really attached to it. But you'll see Get and Transform become the default Get Data experience in the Data tab. We don't have a timeline for it, but I'll say that we're working heavily on that, and you expect to see that sooner rather than later. With that, let's go and do a little bit of data preparation, OK? And we're going to go and connect to, let's say, a web page. And I have this website over here. I have information about the movies that, the total gross for all movies released in 2015, and how much they made, how many theaters they were broadcasted on, and so on. So I'd like to get this table into Excel and be able to create a report, maybe a pivot table or an Excel chart on top of it. Let's go and get that URL. And we're going to go into the Excel window again. So I launched the From Web connector. I can just paste my URL here. And now we're going to go and actually analyze this web page. We're going to try and identify all of the tables that exist. It came down with 2 different tables. There's also the entire document tree. So if you were looking for something that was not a table, you could drill through the document. and find it that way. In this case, it's actually table 1, the one I want. And at this point, I could do two different things. I could either load the data, either directly to the spreadsheet, or if I go through load to, I could get to pick things like creating a connection-only query or loading the data to the data model, or I could do an edit. In this case, I want to go edit because I have a few columns here that I want to get rid of. So if I go into edit, I'm going to go into the query editor dialog. This is the primary experience for you to do data preparation. And here you see that there's a few elements. There's a ribbon that exposes a lot of data transformation capabilities, like removing columns, keeping a specific set of rows or discarding some rows, splitting columns. You could do things like promoting the first row as headers. You could do the data combination operations that I was mentioning earlier with like merge and append. And you could do a bunch of other transforms, either to modify existing columns or the table itself, or to add new columns, things like math operations or date-based operations to like parse dates or extract the beginning or the end of a month or a specific period. Lots of filter options as well. So that's going to be like your primary toolbox to go to. Now, for some rocket scientists like Ken, you actually notice that you could go into the View tab and enable the formula bar. This will actually give you a way to actually see the underlying formulas generated. This is using the Power Query formula language, also known as M. M stands for Data Monkey as well. And so let's go and do some reshaping. I want to keep the rank column. I want to keep the movie title. I want to keep the studio, the total gross, and the number of theaters. Okay? I'm going to remove the other columns. And now I'm going to do a few other things. For instance, this one I would like to call title. This one is actually just the total gross, so I'm going to remove the theaters part of it. And here is actually just the theaters, so I'll just rename that. OK, let's actually clean up the types. This actually is a text column with a dollar symbol, so let's go convert that into a currency type. This is actually a decimal number with 4 decimal digit precision. So that's cleaned up now. Theaters, let's go and change this to whole number. And there's also something tricky in this data set. And for this, you actually need to either load and realize that there's errors, or actually scroll all the way to the bottom. But there's these 3 rows, which actually don't belong with the rest of the table. Let's go back to the HTML page to see what happened. There's these 3 rows at the bottom that, as I said, they're just like kind of summaries for this current page. So we can exclude that in 2 different ways. One approach would be in these columns that I have selected theaters, when I converted that column to whole number, I'm actually getting errors. If I click in the backend, in the background of that cell, you actually see that the error is that we cannot parse that cell value as a number. So one way of actually cleaning those errors would be to select that column and go in here and in the ribbon click in remove errors. So that basically will get rid of all of the rows that contain an error in one of the cells for that specific column that's selected now. Another way of doing this would have been, I go to the Home tab and I go to Remove Rows. And here I can remove rows from the top, from the bottom, and so on. So I could do a remove bottom rows. And I'm going to remove the bottom 3. OK? So with that, my data is actually cleaned up. And I'm going to just call this query movies. And now I'm going to go close and load. I'm going to do close and load too. Actually, if I do close and load, it's just going to load into a new spreadsheet. If you go close and load to, it will actually let you pick if you want to create connection only, if you want to load to the data model, or if I select, like I want to load to the worksheet as a new worksheet table, I can specify whether it will go to a new worksheet or to an existing one. So I'm just going to say existing. And I'll just load. And at this point, we're running this query again against the external data source, in this case, the web page. And we're going to refresh. And we got 100 rows loaded. OK? That's quick and easy. But now let's actually get into the cool part. If I go back to this website, you'll notice that there's not just a single page with data. We actually have multiple pages. I can go to the 101 to 200, and so on. So there's actually 7 different pages. And I, of course, would like to get all of these 7 pages into Excel, right? I don't want to analyze just the top 100. I want to do all of them. So let's go back and walk through how you can actually do this. We're going to go back into the query editor. So we're going to go back into query, and we're going to go click edit. We can actually change this query in a way that we can get all the pages, right? If I switch back here, you will notice that the URL here has the page number. Page equals 7 in this case. And that, of course, was captured here in our original query step. So if I go to the source step, you're going to see that I have that here. I have page number 1. All right, so now it's when it becomes an advanced demo, because I'm going to go into the advanced editor. So I can go into the View tab, click Advanced Editor. This is going to give me the full M code that got generated through all of those UI transformation steps that I applied. The first step here matches the source step that I just showed you through the UI. And here I can parameterize that page equals 1. If there's one line of code in M that you should learn, it is this one. How to pass a parameter. Page equals that. And now this turned into a function, and I can actually use that page parameter as something that will be parameterized in my query. And I'm going to replace that with this portion of the URL. So I'm going to close those double quotes, and I'm going to say number.toText. And I'm going to pass the page parameter, and I'm going to do the ampersand. That's the syntax for concatenation of string values or text values. And then I open double quotes again. And that's going to basically append that number that I'm going to pass in through number.toText. Let's actually add a space there. That's going to concatenate it as the page get parameter here, and then it will concatenate the rest of the URL. If I hit done now, you see that this actually turns the preview into something different. This says function now. It looks completely different. In fact, let's actually rename this and say get page. If I go back to the home tab and then I say close and load, we actually removed the preview that we had in the spreadsheet. And we also changed the representation here on the workbook queries pane. You see this FX symbol. Usually, if I double click a query, it would take me into the query editor. But if I double click now, it actually gives me this invoke dialog where I can specify a page number, let's say page number 3. And then that creates a new query that's actually the result of that invocation of a function. So we do a different treatment for these function queries. And that's actually pretty cool. Let me actually discard this guy. Because now what I'm going to do is create a blank query that will have page values between 1 and 7. That's all the ones that I would like to invoke, basically, and then get all 7 pages. Let's go and do that through a blank query. So if I go to new query, from other sources, blank query, I can type here and create a list. So 1.7. That's a syntax for creating a list. And now I can turn this into a table. It's going to ask me for delimiter. I don't have any, so that's fine. So now here I can add a custom column to invoke the other query, the get page query that I just created. Get page of column 1, that would be my page parameter. Click OK, and now it runs. And I get 7 tables back. And they look like this column with nested data. If I click actually into one of the background here, you're actually going to see that first table starting at movie number 1. If I go to this one, it's going to be 201. So all I need to do at this point is expand this data. I could either expand or aggregate. In some scenarios, I might want to do aggregate to pull counts or sums or averages for specific nested data. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and expand. And voila, that's my full table with 697 movies. I can now get rid of column 1. And I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that I have the right column types over here. So I'm going to make sure that, actually, instead of using this, why don't we go ahead and use something that we just added recently. We added this detect data type that basically will allow me to detect the type for my column rather than having to assign it manually. And in fact, I could select all columns and then do a detect data type that will fix up column types for all of my columns in my table. All right, so with that, let's gonna go ahead and call these movies now for real, because I have all 697 movies, and click close and load to. I'm going to load to the same location, sheet 1, A1. And now we should get 697 movies, hopefully. You see how it runs in chunks of 100, because that's how we are executing those requests. Okay, so now I got 697 rows, but I got 2 errors. What's that about? You can actually get this nice error experience where you can click into the hyperlink with the 2 errors. And this is actually going to create a new query for you that's called errors in movies, in this case, in the other query name, that will just do the following. It references the movies query. It adds an index, keeps only the rows with errors, so kind of the opposite operation to what we have done before, and then reorders those columns. I can actually then dig into this one and realize that there's some NA value in that column theaters that it's something that we couldn't parse into a number. So with that, I can just discard that guy and come back here and fix up those things in advance. So I could come here, and even at this point, I could go and apply a replace errors operation to replace that error value with something like 0, because it would mean 0 theaters. Okay? So with that, we fix it, and now we should be able to just get all 697 rows without any errors, hopefully. Okay, so that's just, like bread and butter Power Query capabilities. That's all the same in Excel 2016. Now, let's look at the specific things that we've improved with the Excel integration. For example, if I am just like, accidentally deleting this query, I still have the data, but I don't have the query anymore. It's not refreshable. Now I can actually come into the undo and be able to undo the deletion of that query and get my query back. How cool is that? Another one, I'm able to now click on a query, copy. How cool it would be to just paste the same query into the same workbook and get the copy. Even better than that, if I copy this guy again, and I go into a new Excel instance, and I go, not that guy, this guy, and I go into the workbook queries pane, I can right-click and paste, and we're going to copy that query from the other workbook. Not just that query, but also all of the queries that this query needs in order to refresh. In this case, it needed the getPage function. And to make things even better, and back to the beginning of the session where I was talking about Power BI Desktop, you could actually seamlessly transition your queries from one tool to another and come here and paste your query, and it will get the exact same experience. It's all a fully consistent experience across the 2 products, and we're making it really seamless for you to transition between them so that you can combine analysis with report authoring. So hopefully that's something you guys find useful, the combination of all of those features. And so let's go back into the deck just for a second. And I'm looking with my eye to the clock, and we have 10 minutes left, and I have one more demo to show you, which is specifically around the new object model support. So let's take a look at what we are enabling. I'm going to make this bigger here. So with Excel 2016, we are introducing a new Excel object model object. It's the workbook query. Basically, you can now create a new query one, like in this case, as a workbook query. Now, workbook queries have a few different attributes. They have a name. They have a formula that's basically the underlying M code that you saw when I went into the advanced editor. And they also have a description that's optional. Actually, you could also attach a description for better identifying that query later. And you also get a new collection that's a workbook global object that basically is workbook.queries. And then you can do workbook_queries.add to add the new queries, the new workbook queries that you just created. Now I'm going to show you a quick demo of how that works, because I'm a lazy guy and I'm not that good at VBA. Rather than coding by hand, what I'm going to do is use the macro recorder to actually record a macro, and then I'll show you the VBA code. Let's go into a new Excel window. All right, and we're going to connect to a spreadsheet. Let me actually show you that spreadsheet. It's going to be on work folders, demos, and it's going to be Data Insect Summit, Excel, multi-level. Okay, let's look at this spreadsheet. This is probably something that, as you look at it, you understand the format. And this has some data about sales numbers, maybe. It says something about Seattle and Portland. So you kind of understand that these 3 columns, they actually belong to Seattle. The next 3 for Portland, and then Vancouver, and so on. And then the intersection means sales for bikes in Seattle in 2002. Well, that's great for you to understand because you're such a smart people. But for performing some analysis on top of this and then combining this data with other data sources is not in a great format, because this data is pivoted, and then it also has some missing headers, double level of headers, and so on. So we're going to actually go and clean this up using get and transform. Before going there, let's actually start recording a macro. And now I'm going to go into the data tab, and we're going to go into from file. We're going to use from Excel workbook. Let's find that location again. Demos, data insights, summit, Excel. So that's my spreadsheet. Now we're going to go and give you the navigator dialog with the list of tables that we find in there, tables and spreadsheets and name ranges that we find in that Excel spreadsheet, in that Excel workbook. There's just one. In this case, of course, I have to go edit this and prepare my data first. So the first thing that we need to do here is actually turn rows into columns. For those of you who are math experts, this is transpose operations, if you remember from your algebra and matrix lessons at school. So that's what we just did, transpose, turn rows into columns. The second thing we need to do is use the first row as headers. So now I have headers for each year. This thing over here, it was the city, but then I actually need to fill down these values. So I can go fill down. And now I'm going to call this thing city. And this second one is actually the product category. And now all I need to do is basically unpivot all of the other columns. So I could select just these two, right-click and say unpivot the other columns. And this will make sure that for every new column that shows up in this table, like next year if I get 2016 in that spreadsheet, we'll actually pick it up and do the right unpivot operation as well. This sounds easy, but actually, it's something that not many other products or no other product out there can do when you think about self-service BI. But all right, so I'm going to clean up my column names, year, and then this is sales. And let's just make sure that I have the right data types. This is going to be a decimal number, and this is going to be a whole number. And let's go call these sales. All right, so I'm going to go close and load this. Great, and now I can use the auto recommended charts feature to actually create an interesting chart just like that. Sum of year by category, so basically it's total sales by year by category. They happen to be the same or almost the same because I didn't do a good job on actually creating a right data set, but you get the idea. Okay, so at this point I can go and stop recording that macro. Great, so now we have a macro recorded here. I'm going to go into a new workbook to run that macro. Actually, before going there, let me show you the code behind it. So let's go edit it. This is the code that got generated, so we're actually using the queries collection in the active workbook to actually add a query that has the name sales. This is the formula that got all generated, and then I didn't actually provide the description. And then we're providing the information for where it should be loaded. In this case, we were loading to the worksheet, so that's all hooked up here with a list object and so on, and all of the default properties like background query refresh and all of that. All right, and then on top of that, we actually created that visual and that pivot chart. So let's go into the new workbook now and run this macro. So without me doing anything, we get that debugging error, whatever that is. But after it, you actually get that automatically generated. So think about the power of this solution for you to actually automate creation of these queries. You could even hook this up with anything else that you can do through VBA. Like, for instance, you could create a parameterized report for sales by city. In this case, that maybe takes the city name from the spreadsheet, and that's something that you give your business user. He specifies that value, and then you refresh the whole query, read that value from the spreadsheet, and then dump it into your query, and then build a visual on top. So that's a lot of powerful stuff that you can do with VBA integration in Excel 2016, and we're really happy to have it. We're aware that this is something that we can improve for years and years to come, so please keep that feedback coming, and we'll keep close attention to that. All right, so with that, I have 3 minutes left. I wanted to just give you a reminder about all of the other sessions that you might be interested in. For the first 2 groups here, I guess, unless you take a time machine, your only other alternative is to just watch the recording because they happen at 10 a.m. or just are finishing now. You have a couple more sessions, 3 more sessions this afternoon. And then tomorrow you have a bunch of sessions starting at 8 a.m. They're all Excel-specific sessions. Now the last one here, I'm kind of doing a little bit of advertising for my other session. And the main reason why I'm doing that is because Today, I covered mostly the Excel integration capabilities. In this session, I didn't do as much in terms of data preparation, core demos and transformations. Tomorrow, I'm going to be focusing on that stuff. I have about 5 or 6 different data transformation demos in the session, and that's going to be tomorrow at 1:30 p.m., also in this room, I believe. So hope you guys like the session. We have a bunch of resources here. As we were saying, we put a lot of attention into customers' feedback about our products, so you'll want to go to the Excel user voice forum to provide feedback and vote for the things that you would like to see next in Excel. We monitor that forum really closely. We have a lot of transparency there in terms of marking things as being planned, being under development, already completed, and so on. So you'll have a very rich and interactive dialogue between you guys and our product team on that forum. And then we also have a free Excel course at edx.com that will basically walk you through all of the capabilities for getting data and then using Power Pivot, pivot tables, and also Power BI, so you can like kind of glue it all up together if you want to take the next step in your learning training. We have a few other resources here on the side, a few announcements, and so on. And I'm waiting for you to take the picture. All good? All right. With that, we have about a minute left for questions. I'm also going to be hanging around for the rest of the day here at the bottom of the stage, and then we'll go into the Ask the Experts for the entire afternoon today. So if you have questions, feedback, just approach me. I don't bite. I'm actually hungry now before lunch, so you might want to wait until after lunch. But besides that, I'm really happy to have you guys here this week, and looking forward to talking to each and every one of you about Power Query and Excel. Thank you so much.